Out on the fringe, if you follow the story back, you find the center. Tracing the edge.
You know, my dad had an old selection of gear that was super outdated, and I would play with gear and put chocks in the deck in my parents' backyard and stuff like that.
He was about 14, and he was just starting to go climb up in the Central Cascades, not too far from our house. He couldn't drive yet, and I kept saying, you know, as soon as you're 16, you'll be able to do this all you want and everything. And he always wanted me to take him up toward Snoqualmie Pass, drop him off, or up to Index, and then come back, you know, 3 days later. And, you know, I just couldn't do it. And he said to me, I feel like you don't support my climbing. And I said, well, Colin, it's not like dropping you off at the Boys and Girls Club to, you know, shoot baskets or something. And he was still, like, really small and skinny, and he just looked up at me and he said, but this is what I do. And, of course, my heart just melted. You know, who would deny their kid to be what he wanted to be?
Got my first ice axe when I was 11 years old or so, and pretty much have learned almost everything I know here in the Cascades. You know, I'd been scrambling third-class stuff since I was 9 years old or something, and so 11 is when I climbed Mount Hood, for instance, so maybe that's when I first started climbing, but it's all kind of a gray area.
3 years ago, Colin Haley exploded on the alpine climbing scene. It was like he came out of nowhere. It seemed like every 3 months there was a new article about him in the magazines, and always the question was clear. How does a 22-year-old college student enter the elite ranks of alpinism? I mean, it seemed like 1 week this guy was turning in the term paper, and the next week sending Sarah Torrey. Was his risk tolerance off the charts? Maybe he was just lucky.
I see a lot of people who are really good climbers, and they're on an alpine route, and even if they're acing the route finding, the climbing's easy for them, everything should be going fine, they falter simply because they constantly feel, you know, not at ease and worried and nervous because they're out of their element. You know, easy routes, hard routes, whatever, I feel at ease in the mountain.
When climbing in a super alpine environment, under the most extreme conditions, I trust Patagonia clothing to keep me warm and dry.
In the last decade, there may have been alpinists who have climbed harder, but it's arguable that no American has climbed more big alpine routes than Colin. He's done it in Alaska, in Patagonia, in Chamonix, the Himalaya, but it all began right back here in the Cascades.
Forbidden is the first climb I did that was a legitimate, you know, alpine route that involves all sorts of difficulties. You know, it's got a glacier that's pretty broken up. It has a steep couloir, 50-degree neve, and then a long alpine ridge. I was 12 years old at the time, and it was definitely, you know, mind-blowing for me. It's, you know, Mount Hood is one thing, Forbidden Peak is, it's a real alpine climb, not just a slog, you know. We got benighted on the descent, so we did some rappels in the dark, off route. We got back to our bivvy super late, and when I was 12 years old, I was so worked. My brother and I just passed out instantly.
His mom even called the park rangers. They were waiting for Colin, his brother Booth, and his father at the trailhead.
It was a real adventure, you know. It's kind of, when things don't go according to plan, is usually the best climbing memories, I think.
On that first trip, something important happened. A 12-year-old Colin Haley stood on Forbidden Summit. He looked across the valley and stared at the north face of Johannesburg.
The north face is it's a solid 1,500 meters of relief, and it's right across the valley from Forbidden Peak. So I remember when I was 12 approaching Forbidden and looking back at this big steep face covered with hanging glaciers and thinking, that's insane, you know. I couldn't imagine people climbing it.
The Sierra may be more photogenic, the Rockies higher, but no mountain range in the lower 48 is burlier than the Cascades. No set of mountains could prepare you better for the world's great ranges. This is the story of how to connect the dots, how to move from one peak to the next, until a backyard range leads to the world's hardest to reach summits.
Oh, I was thinking for water bottles, we've got the 4-liter dromedary cached.
Yeah.
I was thinking we take just that and 2 Nalgene's.
Today's music comes from the very talented Ken Christensen off his brand new double disc album, Sunshine Shadow. Support for Colin's episodes comes from La Sportiva. Whether it's a 10-foot tall boulder problem or a 5,000-foot wall of snow and ice, La Sportiva makes the technical footwear for your next big send. For more articles and videos, visit Sportiva Live at www.sportiva.com. Tracing the Edge is brought to you by Patagonia.